What do you think the problem is with community organizations, that what they're suffering with in this day and age?
Okay, so we've always worked with community organizations. Like if you remember, Saf, some of our, I think mine and your first thing together was a community project. I remember.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
you had like an old light that was from like, I don't know. I think you use it for like, I don't know, gardening or something. It's
Use
like
it
a
for
garden
gardening.
light. It was a garden light, and you were like, oh, it's a floodlight. I remember it's
It's
a
a
floodlight.
floodlight, yeah.
And you were trying to film a video for a community organization, and I remember at the time like that's where we started. And like let's roll back 8-9 years ago. Community organizations had it very easy in terms of marketing because
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
all very new. Like people in the UK, they weren't used to having being marketed to for Islamic courses or even charity, for example. It was all very traditional, TV appeals and stuff like that. So when we came on the scene with video content, this was kind of like fresh. It was new, and community signups would do amazing. I remember we used to produce videos for clients, and there was no other metric we'd even ask them about or they'd even ask us about. It was
Yeah.
just like, you produced the video for us, the video smashed it, we got loads of sign-ups, bale, everyone's happy. But like
Yeah.
later on down the line, things started to shift. Obviously with different social media platforms and TikTok and these sort of things started to shift. Now, that's another topic. Let's go back to the question that you asked about the issues community organizations are having. So community organizations often are led by small teams. Yeah, so you'll have like a figurehead who may be a teacher or a scholar who has devoted a lot of time in their life to go study, and they've come back now and they've wanted to set something up.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times they set something up without kind of going into politics, but like they don't really. A lot of them don't work with mosques. So they won't go into a mosque and become like, there's things at play here. So what ends up happening is they'll set up their own place and they'll set up their own institutes. And Saf, you've seen in the last 10 years how many institutes have popped up.
But do you think that's an issue? I'm going to continue on with your point, but
I think,
do you think it's a good thing that you get scholars that go away and they come back and then they no longer work with masajids and they just set up their own thing?
it's obviously you can look at it in both ways. You can say that, look, you've got there's some mosques that might not be catered towards some of the stuff that these institutes are doing in terms of activity and stuff like that. But I think, like, I look at your own example and look at what you're doing. You've studied, but you're very much in tune with the masjids, as opposed to setting up your own thing. And there's others that do that as well. But what's ended up happening for whichever reason is that all these places have popped up everywhere. And these institutes, like I said, you've got a main person, might be a sheikh or a teacher who's certain, and then they've got a couple of people with them. Now, what ends up happening is that the funding model for these organizations essentially is wholly fundraising. Like
Right.
all these places have been set up by donations from public, most of them. So what ends up happening is that year on year they're under pressure to make sure that the revenue is high enough, that they've got all their costs covered, and
Yeah.
that creates pressure in terms of fundraising every single year. They've got to do it every year, no matter what. Now, before it was fine. 7 to 10 years ago, there might have already been a few organizations. So it might not have been as hard to do that. But now, because you've got more and more organizations vying for the same thing, essentially, and remember, you've also got charities as well that are kind of going towards the same pot.
Yeah.
It becomes very, very difficult. Now, as I mentioned, a lot of these organizations have small teams. These small teams consist of people who may have a 9 to 5. They might work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And then on top of that, they're volunteering for your community organization.
And they've got kids, and some of them have.
They've got
other
kids, they might have their own businesses,
Yeah.
they've got, they might be studying themselves, for example. So what ends up happening with a lot of these volunteers is they suffer from burnout. They suffer from burnout because they're just taking on too much. And what then ends up happening is that the jobs that are supposed to be very simple end up taking a long time because they're not getting done. And then what ends up happening is the teacher or the scholar ends up getting burnt out because they now have to do admin jobs when their focus should be on teaching or working on curriculum, for example. So that's one of the big issues, and what volunteer burnout ends up then doing is you end up getting like a revolving door of volunteers. People coming in, people coming out. And you've, mashallah, served for many years in different organizations. You've probably seen this, like different volunteers come and go.
Yeah. Many. Sheikh Ibrahim, once he said that, look, many people have come and many people have gone. And we've seen as well, people come, they get excited, they with the shoe, but when they get, down and dirty, when you got to go into the trenches, when you're getting phone calls, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, and something needs to be ready by 7 in the morning, you have to do it. There's just there's no concept of, oh, but there's nothing else in your life but that thing, you know what I mean? But that's the point, that like, you've got to commit. You've got to show that commitment. You know what I mean?
So then, obviously, you've been in these situations, Saf. So what does that result in then for the organization? Like, if you've got a revolving door of volunteers, you've got people coming and going, you've obviously got objectives, you've got goals, you've got KPIs that you need to hit. You've also got a responsibility to people who've donated to you to make sure that you're doing things properly, so that money is not wasted. So what's that like for organizations?
I think one disparity in, like, you see in organizations, and I've worked in many organizations, so I'm not pinpointing one or anything like that, but some do this well and some don't do this well. And what I've seen is many organizations, they do want to run professionally, because I think scholars and teachers, naturally, they've got this desire to do things properly. And I think the deen gives you that. It gives you this inspiration of you want to do things properly. So like itqan, you want to do with things with ihsan, you want to do these things. So they have these concepts there that, listen, no, whatever you do properly. But then, and they want to, the metrics are almost run like a business. Do you get me? So they got metrics and they want to see, but the processes, like for instance, they want results, like a business gets results, but then their staff are all voluntary. The people doing the work, majority of them are voluntary basis. Do you get me? So, and now that is going to question of how much commitment they can, how consistent they can be, how much commitment and money is not always this. Obviously, I've been kind of serving for, some time. What I'm saying is money is only the factor when you do things, but I do think it kind of provides longevity in people who are serving those institutes. But and that's where you see an issue where it's like, look, man, you want these type of results, but you can only get the output when it's a significant amount of input and certain types of inputs. And I think the issue is that, like, there's a massive reliance upon voluntary work, which is an issue. It's a lot of people do give their times voluntarily, but maybe it's a question. Maybe it's, some people can't commit that 100% because it's on a voluntary basis. I think, I don't know, there is I have seen that way. It's like, okay, we want results like as if it's like a business. Like when I say businesses, everything's got metrics, but our inputs is, it's not as professional as a business would run. So these issues I've seen, some organizations have got it right, and those are the organizations that do well.
Yeah,
the organizations that do well, that do the input is as professional as the expectations of the output, then you do see results in that. Like for instance, in a business, you have to invest in marketing, ads. You got to do these things. If people don't know you exist, then people can't buy from you. In marketing, that's what we tell the business owners. So if people don't know you exist, they can't buy from you. If you're not going to follow up with people who are interested, they're not going to remember you. So it's the same thing with community organizations. If people don't know your organization exists, from a marketing perspective, it's the same as nobody knows you exist. How are they going to use your services? And then secondly, okay, they know you exist now, but you've got to keep in touch with them. That's the problem that we try solving with Community Connect.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you brought in a few things there, and I think just what springs to mind is, if you think about a lot of organizations we've spoke to in the lead up to launching this product, is just scattered channels of software and communication channels.
Yeah.
Like, I think we had one client who was using like 6 different subscriptions for running things, and nothing communicated with each other. Now you try and run that through a WhatsApp group with volunteers who are part-time, and you're trying to pull in data from different sources. I don't know.
You can't
do
run
it.
like an organization. You can and especially like, for instance, you're raising £1 million, £2 million. You're promising this amazing building structure, and but the foundations. What I've seen is just many organizations, what they get it wrong is at a foundational level. They've raised £2 million. They're ready to build the building, and they start building the building, whatever. But just at a foundational level, in terms of collecting data, keeping in touch with people that have showed interest, pushing people down the funnel. These simple concepts that we use, apply, test, and they bring results with businesses. For some reason, community organizations, they just want to bypass that. And I don't know why that is. And obviously, we spoke about this. We want these community organizations, and maybe it's because they don't have the knowledge of, it needs to be, this is the processes that you have to have, at a psychological level. People will forget about you easily. There's a saturated market in one sense. A lot of madrasas out there, a lot of institutes out there. Everyone's saying that, we can make it change. Everyone's trying to build a building. Everyone's trying to do their bit, which is a good thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But what I'm saying is, just like a business, people, they're going to engage with you, and then you have to remind them that you exist. And I think that's, for me, that's what the problem I thought, we could solve with this Community Connect.
I think as well, with regards to Community Connect, one thing that I find is this centralized system of communication. Like, a lot of people will have different volunteers doing different things. For example, they'll have one who's in charge of the WhatsApp community. They'll have somebody who's managing the social media. They'll have somebody who's dealing with people on the phone. They'll have another person who's trying to manage email. And then one person might have been contacted by different people about the same thing on a different channel. It's not centralized. So with the system, one of the things that we've built is a centralized system for communicating. And how does that work?
You were saying like one person doesn't want it. Sometimes I've seen cases where the imam that's teaching usul al-fiqh is the one that's sending the emails. He's writing out the copy. He's getting back to the WhatsApp messages. He's doing the advertising. He's sharing the posts. Yeah, and I just think, they have a lot of himma, but like, they just spread themselves out really thin. They really need to think about, like, what, I just need to focus on my craft. And then, unfortunately, if they do have staff, they're not trained. Like, you might even get like a voluntary basis. Like, you might get a volunteer that's willing to do the social media management, or write out emails or something like that, or send out emails, but they're not trained. And you can't blame them for it as well, because they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They think, I'm doing it on a voluntary basis. And then the head of the organization will think, it's voluntary anyway, so what can we expect? Like, in the sense of, we can't say, you come with a degree or qualifications on that field. And then that's what ends up happening is they're relying upon people. It's not about volunteers, but it's about the skill sets. Do you really have the skill sets? And another thing is passion.